Hello and welcome to Chat DPS. In a week where Marks and Spencer's in the UK was hacked and appears to have had no crisis plan, and where the co-op were caught out not quite telling the truth about being hacked and losing data. We're exploring a few things closer to home. Firstly, we'll look at info stealers, a malware that's been alleged to have stolen credentials from 100 of the top 4 bank employees. Next, we explore how hundreds of e-commerce sites fell victim to another supply chain hack. And lastly, we'll take a look at Hexicore, a Queensland-based IT provider who fell victim to KillSec, a ransomware group with over 109 corporate victims declared so far. So welcome back, Robert. So cyber criminals have stolen almost 100 staff logins at the big 4 banks. Experts are saying this is a story from the ABC. Dozens of bank employees' logins have been compromised in inverted commas after cyber criminals sort of made a play through this malware they've been sharing around for a while now. Credentials were stolen and shared online, say experts. So the logins were stolen from workers' devices using info stealers, a type of malware designed to harvest valuable data from computers and phones and send it on to criminals. The big 4 banks say they have protections in place to prevent unauthorized access to their systems, including the use of stolen staff credentials. And then there's this cyber intelligence firm, Hudson Rock, have told the ABC that it found dozens of compromised staff credentials from both ANZ and Commonwealth Bank and fewer from NAB and Westpac. Whilst the banks state that they've got protections in place to prevent access, Hudson Rock claimed that it could allow hackers to gain access to what is known as initial access and break into the banks. We all know that bigger organizations have got, or most organizations these days will have processes around, sort of taking back hardware and changing credentials on exit of employees and what have you. Is this just a sort of like a bit of scaremongering, or is there a little bit more to it, or what do you think is going on here, Robert?
I think a little bit of scaremongering, but also I think it raises some important points to be aware of. So look, it's an article in the ABC, so they're going to be a little bit dramatic. 100 employees' credentials are exposed on the dark web, the top 4 banks. It sounds quite dramatic, but as the banks have responded, they have, as you said, processes in place for when an employee leaves to shut down those accounts. So those credentials should really not be worth very much. And then for existing employees, they'll be updating passwords. If somebody did use the credentials for an existing employee, you would expect the big 4 banks to have multi-factor authentication. You would expect that those accounts would have certain privileges, which would prevent you from accessing more sensitive information. So there'll be controls in place. But I think the more broad point is the fact that this particular malware is more in use, and there seems to be an increasing trend for this particular malware to be used across various sectors now. This particular cybersecurity firm has focused on the banking sector, but this malware is being applied across all sectors across the country and across obviously various countries. I think the key point is that credentials are being stolen across various sectors, and people need to be aware that this sort of thing is happening. A little bit like we've spoken multiple times. In defense, in a similar way to the banks, you need to have processes for when employees or contractors leave your business. You need to have processes in place for how you manage the accounts of your employees, the privileges, password refreshment, multi-factor authentication, all those sorts of things. Those should be in place to defend against this particular risk. Because, the article goes on to say, look, it's if you get hold of this information, it's pretty easy to access the banking systems. And from there, you can traverse internal systems and grab information. So you might be able to, even if you can't get into, say, some customer details, you could probably get onto, as it suggests, Slack or Teams or something like that, and see what personal information you can grab from there. Maybe there's other key information that'll let you get to other parts of the system. So look, there's some valid points in there. As the banks have gone back and probably not too worried because of the defenses they have in place. I think who should be more worried is probably your small to medium enterprises that are less sophisticated than the top 4 banks when it comes to managing employees and contractors that are either currently within their organisation or leave the organisation. So that's probably where the greater risk lies, and the fact that this particular malware is active and growing across across the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that I picked up on this was the fact of how long are these guys actually in your network? I mean, there was a claim in there that the infection has started back as long ago as 2021, and they're only just now finding out that this has actually been taking place. I mean, there's obviously got to be things that the banks are doing. I mean, I
Mhm.
can't think of a worse, industry vertical to go attacking, really. It's so highly regulated, and these guys are so competent in terms of what they do and how
Mm.
they do things.
Mm.
Actually having somebody at rest within the network for that amount of time just proves
Mm.
the fact that if you're not doing checks and balances along the way, then you've really got some problems to answer for, right?
Yeah, and look, it comes down to active threat monitoring. And again, this is down to resources. So the top four banks can be doing a lot of work trying to understand what the current threats are, and then reacting to that in terms of their monitoring. That whatever sorts of footprints this malware might leave within the system, they should be able to identify that, which is great for the top four banks. They've got huge amounts of resources. They can do threat analysis themselves, or they can outsource that to sophisticated cybersecurity suppliers. Again, your small to medium enterprises cannot do this, but to the extent they can, they need to be looking at their monitoring and monitoring unusual activity within their systems to the extent they can. So again, it's really that kind of looking at, it's not so much looking at the sophisticated top four banks and what they're doing, but kind of reflecting back onto the 99% of other organizations across the country which are a lot more vulnerable.
Really good point, yeah. So moving on, hundreds of e-commerce sites were hacked in a supply chain attack. So back to supply chain again. This is a story that's been raised by ARS Technica. Cybersecurity Hub picked up on the ARS Technica story, which claims hundreds of e-commerce sites, at least one owned by a large multinational company, were backdoored by malware. The infections are as a result of a supply chain hack that compromised at least 3 software providers with malware that remained dormant for 6 years and became active only in the last few weeks. This sort of like lying low in the network, collecting information, and all of a sudden spurting it all out. The supply chain hack it does pose quite a significant risk for the thousands or even millions of people visiting the infected sites, because it allows attackers to execute code of their choice on e-commerce sites or e-commerce site servers. I think Adobe actually own Magento these days, but the 3 software suppliers identified by Sansec were Tigran, Magasolution (MGS), and Mitanshi. All 3 of the software providers are based upon Magento software or e-commerce solutions. 6 years lying dormant. I mean, and
Mm.
this is a massive piece of software that helps people, perform e-commerce, and for that to be just sort of lying around in a system for 3 years, that's terrible.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And look, I don't profess to know much about e-commerce software. I did, like 5 minutes of research. I've now discovered that. So while the average punter will go and get something off Shopify if they wanted to start up a small e-commerce site, for those businesses who are selling hundreds, if not thousands, of products, Magento is quite a good solution for large-scale e-commerce sites. So that was news to me. And then in terms of actually implementing Magento, there's clearly a number of software houses out there which will customize an e-commerce site for you off the Magento software platform. So these three vendors, 2 of them are based in Vietnam, one's based in India. And what was interesting is when you look into it, and the cybersecurity company that reported it went back to these suppliers, I think that they have either not commented or denied that this is an issue, which is quite interesting in itself. So I think what it comes back to, like if you want to try and kind of lift this point up, is that you need to understand what suppliers you're working with. Have you done your due diligence on them? What's their cybersecurity credentials like? So what do they actually do to actually provide a secure product? They may be great developers. I'm not saying anything against these three suppliers. They may be great at putting in a customized e-commerce site at scale. And clearly, at least one of them has a multi-billion-dollar client. So they might be great at actually implementing the solution, but in terms of protecting it, maybe not so much. So yeah, it's a concern that this has been around for a long time, that it hasn't been identified, and it comes back to you as the customer when you're engaging with these suppliers. What are you doing in terms of checking what are they doing to secure the e-commerce site that they're putting up for you?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, for anybody that's listening that is of interest, then if you are wondering, the easiest way to spot the malicious code apparently is by looking for a function added to it that executes a file named $license file with a capital F as part of the PHP code. A little bit beyond my pay grade, I think, Robert, but
Yeah, yeah.
hopefully somebody out there will actually understand what that actually means. But that's
Mm-hmm.
been sort of like provided as part of a solution to finding out whether indeed you have got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so moving on then, KillSec claims ransomware attack on Queensland IT services firm Hexicor. KillSec ransomware gang has listed IT services firm Hexicor as a victim in its darknet leak site. The hackers claimed that the attack on the 1st of April, and they were offering to sell the data allegedly stolen in the incident to either Hexicor itself or to any other bidder that was willing to come up with the cash.
Mm-hmm.
KillSec has not disclosed how much data it may have exfiltrated or how much it is offering to sell the data for. KillSec itself have emerged on the ransomware scene sometime since October 2023 and rebranded as a ransomware as a service operator in June 2024. Hexicor is just one of 14 victims listed by KillSec that were released anyway on the 1st of April. And while the gang is more recent Australian victims was Wendy Wu Tours. So they've also, they have been across the line. Something like 199, businesses have been attacked. But in Hexicor's case, I think it's a business that boasts around 1,500 business customers and more than 1,000 government customers. I think my point here was, Robert, that they were looking at the fact that, this is an IT and a network service provider that does a bit of security on the side, rather than it's a security company that does security and security alone. So this is where I've been looking at these incidents and thinking, well, where are they attacking? I mean, is there anything that you've discovered on your little journey in time?
It's unfortunate because they're a cybersecurity organization. So for a cybersecurity organization to get hacked is a little bit worrying. And again, it comes back to supply chain due diligence. What are you as a customer of Hexicor doing in terms of making sure that, so why they may sort of hold themselves out as a provider of cybersecurity services, what do they actually do in terms of protecting your data, the systems that they manage? So there's that kind of supply chain due diligence point that comes out of this. The second thing is, as you've touched on, KillSec are clearly very active. It sounds as though they've been very active in terms of recruiting hackers to their organization. They seem to be Russian or from a former Russian state and targeting a lot of typical Western democracies where there's a lot of soft underbelly, small to medium organizations they can go after who they know are going to pay something. So it's a fairly sort of typical pattern. And they, like you say, they've gone after a number of Australian organizations. And it's one of those great challenges for small to medium enterprises is that you do have these active organizations out there who are looking to breach your defenses, exfiltrate data, stick it on the dark web, ask for a ransom, and you've got no guarantees whether you pay a ransom or not that information is going to be deleted or returned and not sold on to somebody else in terms of like a double extortion. So it's very concerning, and as we know, it's just part of this growing trend of, because it's so profitable, of these hacking organizations going after soft targets, small to medium enterprises. You mentioned, I think there's a travel agency. I think they exfiltrated passport information from them. So it's really about, okay, what can small to medium enterprises do to try and harden their systems to try and defend from this, and what can they do in terms of the data that they hold. So, when it comes to the travel agents, what can they do to protect that personal information? Can they look at, do they need to hold that data? Encryption may be quite a complicated solution for them, but at the very least, they should be looking to destroy or not anonymize as much data as possible, so they're not holding it on their systems. So you need to be thinking about things like this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the closing point from me would be, we've had an election over the weekend, and hopefully we'll get some clarity over what's going to be happening in the cybersecurity laws. Again, we're seeing in the press and media the fact that Europe are bounding ahead, GDPR, IDAS, and now we've got the CRS that they've been putting together for some time now. They seem to be years ahead of us, and all of these gangs do seem to be, sort of like focusing on the weak spot, and the weak spot does appear to be Australia at this moment in time, which is really quite sad. Okay, Robert, well, that was Chat DPS for this week. Look forward to staying in contact, and look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Thanks, Nick.